Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, and welcome to Conscious Talk Radio, and I am your host, Linda Summers, and we've got another fascinating show for you today. This is kind of like a continuation, well, not kind of, but it is a continuation from last week. But we are going to talk about today resistance and inherent denial. So let's just kind of dive right into that based upon what we talked about last week, some experiences that you had, and that also astrological, your chart, having the Grand Trine, the Yod Pointing to the house of Aries. We talked about that. We talked about truth. But how does this resistance and inherent denial come into play with all of your experience, but also in general?
Sure. Hi, Linda.
By the way, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to think, when did I first think about this? Yeah, it just comes, I believe I mentioned this last time. Well, I mean, as the first formulation, the idea is there's the truth, you know? We all have our own conceptions of it. We all have our own manipulations of it. And to be identities, we kind of have to do that. But what I'm saying by that is, you know, it's something, I don't even quite remember where it started with me, but I think if we look around ourselves, we see everyone having resistance, and everyone, I feel, I mean, maybe not everyone, but my impression is just about everyone has some aspects of denial of who and what they are, or not being able to deal with that. I think when you think about existence, you think about, well, God, if we could have more clarity, if we could function better, right, then we wouldn't have a problem. What I think might be some of the case is inherently what might be going on with us. Because from a physical standpoint, there's a lot of research, mostly in the physics community, right, but other places, that show we very well are the same thing, literally. Like, whether you talk about Einstein and the theory of relativity, you know, which basically, you know, equals mc squared, as the energy increases, such as perhaps you're moving at a certain rate close to the speed of light, your mass must increase once it gets to a certain point, because the speed of light, mc squared, c standing for the speed of light, is a constant. And the idea here is what they've proven in research is if you start moving at a certain pace to the speed of light, you know, when you get back to Earth, people might be long and dead because your process of time starts slowing down. And therefore, as you get closer and closer to the speed of light, meaning you're the same rate of the movement's speed of light, basically, you would stop. You would meld into things. And just to give you a few other underpinnings of this, the observer effect in physics is, I think, one of the more interesting things as well, because, and mind me for the long-winded response, but the observer effect was something that bore out of some pretty deep physics that said that something called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which basically says you can't know both the position and the velocity of a subatomic particle, something moving at the speed of light, basically, what is referenced as a photon. So, and we can think of this in our psychological worlds too, in the sense that, you know, we either see ourselves here in the now and speculate what it means for us to be in the here and now, or we go, well, that doesn't really tell us where I've been and what the effects that led me up to what I am here and now. You know, these are important questions to know what we are, where we've been, where we're going, all these kind of things, and why a certain state might have effects on us. So the Heisenberg uncertainty principle says you simply can't do it, and that's what I would say that we would notice from a psychological interpretation, that if you look at yourself in the here and now, you wonder where I've been in movement, and if you look at your rate of different places under that movement, you wonder where you are right now. So the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, that was the case. They started studying it. I swear I'll finish with this real soon. They started studying situations. They found what's called the wave-particle duality, which I won't get into it, that. And then they found the observer effect. And the way they found that is they were splitting a subatomic particle, or a photon, actually. And because they were creating two sister photons, and therefore they could gather information about both of them at their rate of speed and their position. What's called the spin of the photon is quantified as position. And then they would manipulate the position or the spin of one photon and compare the difference between the other, and they'd be moving at the speed of light. And then they'd gather that information. Then they decided, well, okay, we're going to have that particle go through a deflector to change its spin at, like, say, time 1/1,000,000th of a second, right? And change the particle. And then they said, okay, well, let's change the particle back at, I don't know, 3 seconds. Who knows? So I don't remember what the exact evaluation was. So they have a particle reflector or spin reflector that changes the spin at 0.1 millionth of a second, and then another at 3. And what you would expect, of course, is once the photon goes to the 3-second mark, it changes the spin back to the same thing as the sister photon. But what actually happened, and this was supported in other research to follow, was that the photon changed its spin prior to getting to that second apparatus to change its spin. Which what they determined is that they termed it the observer effect, because what they deemed, as an analysis in the situation, the largest assumption they can make, right? You don't want to, in science, you don't want to stay within what you can assess, by definition. And all they could really say is you can't really completely study subatomic particles because they're affected by your presence, And this is a big statement. What does this mean? So, and I could list all sorts of research. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, there's a few things that I wrote down. One, we're all the same. And when you say we're all the same, in the meaning of that we are all of the same creation and all the same... No,
we aren't the same creation. We are individuals. So we're of genetic structure, right? But the inherent energy that we are is the same.
Yes.
But but the second you use we, you're referencing an identity, and that is very different, and that is of genetic structure, and that is a component of something that is very negligible in its rate of speed compared to the speed of light.
Well, and that's where you could come in and say there's denial in that well, for some, that could say, and maybe I'm way off, that could say, well, no, it really isn't we, it's me. I am in this, that I am who I am, and not really knowing that I'm a part of all, or all the same energy.
Yeah,
is what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, the part that is you is separate. It's a quantified area of mass, but equals mc squared, and as we get, there's going to be some changes as we move out of our rate of motion, which is what those studies show with E equals mc squared when we put a person on a spaceship or a shuttle and blast them off at a certain speed, that the clocks demonstrate a slowing of time, and therefore, Einstein's theory of relativity and special theory of relativity, that's what they say, time is relative. But the idea of resistance and denial is, if we, here's the postulate, or here's an assumption that I make that is consistent with my experience, and I think explains so much about humanity and the state that we find ourselves in. If we are everything, which pretty much physics says is true, we ourselves are a manufactured aspect on top of that. There's the truth, and the truth that brings us into existence is different than the ultimate truth. We have the capacity to experience things within our 5 senses and within the chemistry that we're made out of. But at the very least, you could say every potential aspect of the periodic table and every relationship, right, will dictate reality if we know every aspect of every component, every relationship of every combination of the periodic table, and who knows if there's more to be found there. But we are mostly carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, There's other things here and there, but the grand composition is that 3, and therefore we're only limited to the knowledge based on that 3, and that's what I mean by we're an independent structure on top of nature, because nature is much more than that. But if inherently to us, we are affected by the truth and have a dialogue with the truth, and the truth has interaction with us, which I can't see how it wouldn't if we're all the same thing.
And when you speak of the truth, you're speaking of this cosmic energy.
I'm not, well, I mean, even to take it out of the concept of cosmic energy, you know, it is what it is, you know what I mean? There is a reality out there. If you jump up, you're going to fall down. Now, that's an idea of gravity and, you know, and large bodies of mass, such as a planet moving around in orbit of a large, powerful mass like a sun. You know, but
right.
There's a reality there. There's information that is consistent. You know, people love to say, well, reality is different for everyone. No, it's not. And what I'm saying is the ultimate, the most profound goal in life is to figure out what is the nature of yourself and what is the nature of reality. And what I've found, basically, is I've had experiences that have opened me up to that understanding, and they're not fairy tales, they're not foo-foo, they're actual experiences that I can communicate directly, and that's what I'm wanting to do here. I'm wanting to communicate those and show people how to do it, and also make a larger circuit amongst us. But to get back to that denial, and then I'll be over with this and people will understand what I'm trying to say, is if it's true that we have a component of nature in us, which we would have to, equals MC square, energy in flux, held down by a negligible rate to the speed of light, if you will. And somewhere inside of us, we know that, you know, maybe not in the sense that we could use our conscious brain, which is of this structure on top of nature, but it's still that chemistry. When we try to change a subatomic particle, it reacts. That's something outside of us, but it always reacts. It's waiting on us to serve us in a way, or to maybe not serve us, but to react towards us. It is consistent with some aspect of us that would have it to do something. And what does that mean?
React or respond? Because
we don't really
distinction between the two.
Well, react, respond suggests some sort of action. React means simply that there is some action to follow. And as far as like the observer effect, which is pure science, it's just that, well, yeah, it is a response. Actually, you're right. Because the idea is they set something to change it. And before that particle gets to that thing that would change it, the particle becomes in agreement with what you intend to do to it and change back before it gets to that moment in time that it is to change.
Right, because it observed.
Well, it's because we're observing it, and it's agreeing to do what we want it to do prior to that place that we set for it to do that. It's decided to do it beforehand, which means subatomic particles and light, moving at the speed of light, like I'm saying, we're negligible to the speed of light. It responds to us. It knows what we are, and it agrees with us. That much I feel pretty certain, and that's what, you know, my adventures into all of this have shown me, and that's what I want people to know. You can, I hate to say, I don't know why I hate to say this, but you can figure out the truth, and we can live in a state where we appreciate one another, and we feel one another, and we want to support one another. There's an inherent problem in that. There's an inherent resistance, and there's an inherent denial. And what I mean by denial is if you are everything, but the you is separate, right? The you is a structure on top of reality, a mass, brought into existence by a negligible rate of speed, such as your biochemistry and the rate of turn of the planet, who knows, in some gravitational electromagnetic state, what's, compared to the speed of light. but you are everything, but you are separate, and that you has an interaction with all that is, as showed through the observer effect, theory of relativity, morphic resonance, which is an interesting thing, chaos theory. You know, there isn't randomness. You would expect a random output of like a million data points, but in reality, you get what's called strange attractors in chaos theory, where form and the Paisleys, if you remember this from the early 80s, I believe, create out of nothing. You know, what should be non-random soup becomes broccoli in the soup. Here we are as these identities, set aside because of the theory of relativity, demonstrated in science that we have a connection and that the universe responds to us in this perspective of watching subatomic particles make those changes before we ask of them, knowing that they move at the speed of light, and therefore that's some of my basis. So the denial aspect is, if you are what you are and you decide to be you and see your face, you must probably to some extent, if somehow you have inherent knowledge of what you are, or that relationship with the universe, making its changes, pushing this way, pushing that way based on what you say, what you do, what you want, who knows the structure of it. People talk about the secret is something very commonly known in, you know, present day spiritual culture, you know. Then what I'm saying is, by some extent and some measure, and I'm not only saying this as a theory, I'm saying look for yourself. I'll bet you anything, if you and anyone that's listening investigates this, this is what they're going to find. We're all in denial of what is and what we are. By some extent, we are not meant to move past into something beyond our identity. Our point of being here, for whatever the reason, forever, how we know to understand it, is a single entity, structured away from the truth. What it means that truth is there and that it interacts with us via that research to show the observer effect, we don't know. And my ultimate aspect that I would have for myself is to learn as much as possible, and I've learned a lot. It's great doing this because it gives me, you know, you, Linda, you have allowed me to talk in such a clarity, because I really don't want to tell people this stuff, you know, but when on this radio program, it's terrific because I set all those things aside and I just talk, and it's nice.
Right. Yeah.
So the denial is there, and therefore the resistance is there. And, you know, let's talk about, and I could share some very odd experiences associated with that.
Yeah, I'd like to have you share those. But before something I had written down when you were speaking that I wanted to ask your opinion on, or what your thoughts are, because I would think that if we are energy, made of energy, and we are raising our vibration, and if people continue to raise their vibration, that would have an effect on this reality and this truth to bring us exactly, when they say we co-create our own reality, it's that response or that reaction that you had mentioned just a little earlier. Wouldn't that be given back to us in a way of, you know, if we're putting out good vibration?
You have to have the appropriate attitude, because your attitude dictates your interaction with the environment. Everyone, you know, you look in the mirror and you go, you look in the mirror and you go, I'm depressed. How am I going to get out of depression? I shouldn't be depressed. But you are only depressed. You are only defining, you are only identifying depression, which is hard to get away. And I'm saying we're all in denial, and you won't get away from it. You'll never get away from it, because to get away from it means you go out of your identity. And I've got ideas of how identity is structured with this, and there are more theories. But I'm going on a tangent. To get back to this idea of, you know, I'm so depressed, you know, you say, how do I get out of this? How do I deal with this? You look in the mirror and you're ugly and you're disgusting and you're seeping with all these issues. And then the next day you wake up and you look in the mirror and you're beautiful. You're excited. You're curious. You're going to have fun. There is no thought that takes you into that. It's that you choose to experience that. And to tell the truth, I now forget why I was saying that to you.
Well, because I was saying, we can have an effect on our reality of this.
Oh, how do you do that? Yeah.
By raising our vibration,
You have to have the right attitude.
Yes.
Here's the thing. There is a God, okay? The problem is how do you want to quantify and understand that God? Is that God simply a human God, or is that God the God of everything? Now, people love to argue whether there's a God, but no one would ever argue that there was a God if we take morality out of God. God is gravity. God is electromagnetism. God is the weak force and the strong force, which is called the search for truth in physics, called the unified field theory. This is reality. We all know this to be. And what I'm presenting to you is a theoretical underpinning to what my experiences are and what I've discovered. But to get into this, you must dispel your identity, because the thing that is within denial is you. And for you to experience, there's no right, I don't think there's any raising your vibration. There is only dispelling you. And by how much you want to put into that, will be what you get out of it. You can't just talk about it. You actually can,
because I think that you can shift I think you can shift the energy. You can raise your vibration what I mean by raising your vibration would be more of a higher consciousness, of being more consciously aware that you are more able to, it's like you were giving the analogy of the person who would wake up depressed. If they're having whatever happened, it could be that moment, but the next moment or the next day, the thought is different. So their reaction or their response to themselves looking in the mirror is going to be completely different.
Yeah. I guess one of the things I was saying, and when you first said that higher energy, that wasn't also a quantified statement, so I guess I had issues with it. So I started saying something, but based on what you just interpreted, you said something much more specific that I understood. And not to say what you said before wasn't something that I should have understood. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things I think that I'm trying to drive home with that, inside of that, is you can't take your knowledge with it. And when you experience it, that which comes back into you and becomes you, even if you go on some tangent flight into the universe, still must be understood by your senses and that which is you. You know what I mean? So it's limited to that experience. But what you can do from an organic experience, an organic firsthand, asking, for clarity on these relationships, which I'm telling you, they're there. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, but I resist that. I don't want to acknowledge, because for me to acknowledge that is to acknowledge that I'm not who I am, and to move towards that is to dispel who I am, which is not the point of why we're here. For whatever the reason of why we're here, we are here, and I'm pretty convinced none of us want to go anywhere else. And therefore, as you get closer, I think, to the truth, there are things that will resist that, as it should if you were meant to be you. So when I say inherent resistance and inherent denial, we are inherently in denial of everything that is in our relationship to it. And we are purposely in resistance to it. So while it's hard for me not to acknowledge all my experiences and say, I've learned a lot.
Let's talk about
when
some
I
of those.
was young. What?
No, let's talk about some of those. So I think it'll give a little bit more, not clarity, but a more visual to the listeners as to
to come to know what's possible too.
Yes.
If they believe what I'm saying. If they believe what I'm saying, but throughout my life, most people have noticed that I don't worry about what I'm saying, which isn't always a good thing. But and I welcome people to call and challenge me. I don't got any problem with a challenge, and I'll be the first to say I don't really fully know. And that would be the truth, right? You can
Right.
only feed off nature. You can only receive nature. You can't dictate to the truth what it should be. It dictates to you, and it will shape you in what it wants. And that doesn't mean it wants anything. Once again, God is an easy proof. What is difficult is that God has morality. Now, I'm sure the Christians hate that statement. And I'm not saying I'm not a Christian, and I said that in a strange way, but it doesn't exclude morality. It's just that there are other thought processes out there, and I don't think any of us would argue with the idea of there being a God if we understand the nuts and bolts of what it means to be God, which is there is something out there, and we are living in it. It is living within us, and we are living in it. It knows us. It must know us because it's everything. We must not know it, but we can experience it, and that's what I think I'm trying to communicate. So I guess let me tell one of the stories of resistance.
Yeah,
right?
before you tell your story, let me just say this to the listeners. This is a non-organized spiritual conversation.
Oh,
don't be deceived by the mention of truth. This is a practical conversation, and his beliefs and theories are all developed out of a non-cause and effect experiences, that they are not a pure thought. They are not a pure thought experiment. So just so everybody listening, we know this is strictly for a practical conversation of his experiences that have happened. So, I mean, they can take their own spin with it, but I just wanted to throw that out there before we start in your experience.
I really appreciate that statement. I want to throw a caveat. It is not a pure thought experiment, but it is a pure thought experiment. Logic dictates, and your desire for the truth and the understanding of reality will show you if you trust God. And once again, reiterating what you just said, if you trust God, and the reason I use the word God is because we are selfish creatures, and we want to see it within the frame of ourselves. And therefore, it is easier us to appreciate and easy for us to have the conversation if we anthropomorphize whatever that thing is out there into us. So it's something that I feel aligned with. It doesn't mean somebody else does, but I do think inherently that might be the case. So, and what you're saying is true, and I don't want anyone to misunderstand. And I don't want anyone to think that I know what I so sound like I know what I'm talking about, and the thing is I think I do.
Well, yeah, because you're basing it upon your own experience, though, which is your experience of that, right?
I've
so you're
done
sharing
my
experience.
dirt time. I've done some amount of dirt time, and maybe I'm gifted, and and I hate to say that, it's stressful, but I have astrological significance to that, and I have access to things and have experiences that I've never seen in anyone, and only have read in reference to that from very few people. And I hate to say it that way. I really don't want to say that. And I'm not saying, to some extent, I'm not saying what I just said, but to the other extent I am, because of the nature of my level of experiences. It's just very rare. It's just extremely rare, and that's the truth, and I can't help it. And it makes me wonder, and that ability to be distorted and think I'm something special is not the truth. I am capable, and I know how to experience these kind of things.
Right, but at the same time, what you're trying to say also is that everybody else can have the same experience.
Everyone can have these, and probably the only difference, even if I am special, which I've said to you before, even if I am special, because this whole Yod thing in my chart, whatever, this whole Yod thing in my chart, and National Astrologer told me that means that I've made a contract with God. It's like a second sun sign. If anyone knows astrology, there's more than your sun. You're not just your major sign, but that's the predominant, right? I was curious, since I can't remember. I looked up in the skies in total wonderment and curiosity, and I wanted to know from a small child. Let me tell you, if you wanted to know from when you were a small child, you would know. So that means there's nothing all that special of me. And everything should be practical. There should be no mystery. What I've experienced probably is because since a small age, and plus some of those experiences catered it to happen more too, I've developed this, and I think anybody would. It very well is still consistent with the fact that I might be gifted somehow, but it doesn't matter. We can practically explain what it is, and I have no right to say, and this is the juxtaposition, and this is the disturbance of identity, and this is the structure of self-denial and resistance, because I have no right to say I'm more special, but at the same time, I see my traits. I know what I think I might be capable of. I might be crazy, but I don't think I am. And that's problematic.
I don't either.
But I think that's what people have in store if they follow this line. They're going to have to deal with these kind of things. So let me tell a story, and then we go from there.
Yeah.
It's an interesting story. Like I said, one of the practice things I would do is I would put myself in I would meditate for 2 hours or something. I would meditate I wouldn't meditate for straight 2 hours. That was too much for me. I would spread it out through the day. And one of the meditations I would do before I would go to school, my college, my undergraduate, I would meditate for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then I would continue, and I would wait for the bus, and I would walk in the bus trying to predict the time of the bus. And and I would put myself in this still mode. And I remember the first time I realized what it was, because I lived in kind of like on the ghettos of this one major city, and everything was quiet, and I walked out there, and there were all these buses and cars cramped in this spot, and I didn't hear anything, and I was like, it wasn't like I don't understand actually to this day, and I was like, why don't I hear anything? Where's all the noise? Later on, I realized the noise wasn't there because I wasn't there. But anyways, what I would do is I would walk by people and I would feel them. I was trying to develop my sensation of things. I was trying to feel what there is to feel about people. And inherently, we all know that when we're next to that inherent partner, we can feel a vibration of them because we're so falling into them that we feel a pulse in them. And that's much of what when I've done energy work. That's all I'm doing is I'm just dropping into that pulse and sitting there with it. And then from there, the magnetic field of the electrical current that surrounds it in a 90-degree perpendicular angle intermingles. And from there, you can expand into things. But that's not the point. So anyways, so I was feeling people. And then I was like, what else can I feel? What else is the nature of the reality? So I started feeling plants. And one time I hallucinated, and I say hallucinated because I was in a classroom, and then all of a sudden I was staring at a medieval knight associated with something that was odd that it came true, and I don't want to say what it is because I only want to identify myself so much. Not that anybody would figure that out, but I'm going to identify something as it anyways. I would feel the energy of plants, and then I realized I was studying plants so that I could do this more. And no matter what I did, I knew the plant. And because of the inherent resistance, like I said, at the very least, I couldn't trust what I was experiencing. How did I not know that it was anything else by me saying I knew the plant? I couldn't secure any information without me knowing the information, no matter how strange it was that I picked up something, but I already knew it. So I started doing an operation that I've done before, which is just really connecting with nature and asking God, once again, God, not organized religion, not even a moral thing, just a state, a relationship with everything, I guess. That if it sees me as worthy, meaning I'm not imposing the truth of my identity, that I'm truly, sincerely seeking the real truth, and I have no intention of taking it to a glorification of my own identity, which I have done in some ways, right here and there. I have a desire to be special, even though I very well might be. But anyways, so I had this idea. I go, okay, well, I need someone else to, I need to find somebody that knows botany like the back of their hands, and they know it from they can walk it through a random forest and identify all sorts of things. That's what I was thinking. I made like a conversation to God with it, and within about 2 weeks, someone called me up, and she knew about stuff with me, and I'd healed her of some stuff with energy, and I had healed her dog of something real serious that you usually die over quite quickly.
Wow.
And she was, yeah, it was interesting because the dog was plugged up with the heart monitors, and yeah, it was quite incredible. But anyways, that's not the point of this story. So she called me. I don't know if it was 2 weeks, but it wasn't that amount of time. She says, there's someone here that you have to meet. She says, he's a botanist, and he's just really cool. He's really down with the earth. And I'm thinking to myself, that's interesting. So I go over there to meet him, and we start talking, and he's a botanist that was trained and is developing his own company to produce, medicinal plants for medical purposes. So he knows his you-know-what. And he tells me that he has been praying to the universe, or however you want to say it, for someone that knows plant, spirit, and medicine, and someone, and here's where I'm going to reveal myself slightly, but whatever, that knows homeopathy. So I know homeopathy very well, and I know plant, spirit, medicine very well from the experiences I already had. I just couldn't trust them. So I wonder if I prayed for someone like him, and he prayed for someone like me, what would be the chances of that when we show up in such remote show? So anyway, we started this relationship. He would take me to plants that I wouldn't know. I would read the plant, and he would repeatedly say, you're right, you're right, you're right. He could make references to that. He was fun because you could walk through the forest with him, and I could say, what's that? And he'd tell me the name, he'd tell me the history, he'd tell me the folklore, he'd tell me medicinal applications. I don't know if he was lying to me here and there, but that didn't strike me about physician, but it was incredible, and it was incredible fun. Like I said, I knew homeopathy, and I didn't know if he was telling me the truth, because there's resistance there, right? I didn't trust him, not because of him, but because of the nature of the information and what I was doing. There's
was giving
confirmation.
There's
denial there is necessary. What?
Mm-hmm. Because it was giving confirmation. Yes?
Yeah, you can't move away from your identity without punishment. And I hate to say it that way, and I don't want to scare anyone, but the truth is the ultimate knowledge, and you shouldn't be afraid of that. And when I say punishment, I don't really mean punishment. I'm kind of a colorful guy. I just mean you're going to have to go through this confusion I'm talking about, and and you got to be careful of who you share it with. But I share it all the time, and you have to develop the conversation in such a way with good examples that the average person can digest what you're saying, which is no easy thing. But it's taken me a long time to do, and you get more and more comfortable, and you come to terms with what you've been experiencing. So anyways, I said, hey, listen, I'm having issues with you. Why don't we just choose a remedy from the Materia Medica, which is where we've recorded information for classical homeopathy, and it's very, very plentiful dispositions of how a remedy will. Homeopathy is based on toxicology, so you like you smoke pot, for instance. We all know some of the characteristics. So you can use pot for as a homeopathic remedy for someone with psychosis, someone that's dull and dopey. You have some people like myself that get a little almost psychotic on it, because I go right into some of the nature of the stuff we're talking about, because I inherently stuff it down. Resistance and denial. I think it's natural. Anyways, we would meet every Saturday or Sunday, and that night before I was to go see him, I had a dream. And in the dream, and when I have strange dreams, or when I have dreams associated, I hate to say it, with God or whatever it is, there's usually someone else talking, and I'm very subservient to that thing. And anyways, it said, well, or I don't know if it was there as much, or I can't remember it quite to the detail, and there, of course, could have been different scenarios that it came up. But I was hearing, and I was in the knowledge that somebody I knew needed a homeopathic remedy, and it started with black, and there was another word. So in the dream, and this was all received very quickly in the dream, and then the rest of the dream was just me flipping through the Materia Medica looking for a remedy called black. So I wake up in the morning with the knowledge of the dream. I go to this friend's house that we've been doing the plant spirit medicine with. He receives a phone call, and I come in. I come in. He tells me I chose a remedy from the Materia Medica because it was some time before that I'd even said that. So I didn't know when he was going to choose that. I'd been teaching him homeopathy and had given him some texts to learn. And he goes, I chose a remedy for the Materia Medica. I was like, great. And then all of a sudden he got a phone call almost immediately after saying that. And I picked up his Materia Medica because, I was thinking, what about that dream? So I looked for a remedy called black, went to the bees, there was no black. So, and I had given him a very large Materia Medica. So I closed it, and he, and I apologize for constantly talking, Linda. But,
no, because we're telling the story. So continue.
So,
yes.
Okay, so he took me up in the mountains, like way up, like an hour and a half, like walk, and then he was on a path, and he went off the path, and he sat me down with this small plant. And some of this is the assumption that he was telling me the truth, I guess. But no. That could just be denial and resistance because it doesn't completely make sense.
Exactly.
I can identify why it doesn't, but that's not necessary. What?
Mm-hmm. So we're doing that all the time. I mean, if people really are listening to the story and of the different things that they experience themselves, they'll realize that, no, that really didn't happen. Or, no,
exactly.
It's like, yeah.
There's always that statement to yourself when you experience a non-causal effect relationship, right?
Yeah.
There's usually cause and then there's effect. But if you have the effect before the cause, there's always some level of that didn't happen. There's always an inherent denial and resistance. But we all know it happened. We all know it happened. Some of us can remember it happened. Most of us not only say it doesn't happen, but they deny its existence, as they should.
Well, what if they sometimes don't? If I had that experience of something, with the lights that I had told you about, right? And that was an odd experience. And can I say, I don't really think that happened. That couldn't have happened because that was just too odd. I could say that, or I could say, yeah, that really happened. I'm not sure why. I'll never know why because how am I going to know? Unless I ask, like you're saying, in asking God this reality.
And you bring up a great point. I'm sorry for interrupting you. That I haven't said that's very important for people to pick up knowledge if they want to know how to do this. And mind you, you have to be careful. Don't overstep something. Don't think you should receive something way beyond because it's grand. Because what you have to inherently know and what you should inherently figure out beforehand is you have resistance to the acquisition of this information based on the denial of the universe. So you must first know the nature of your resistance. You first must know where to start with that. But your resistance isn't going to be so obvious to you. And to know that resistance is to know when you're ready to receive something and know whether you can attain something. And this is a hard thing to determine because there's a denial, and therefore there's a truth operation in that to acquire your knowledge of resistance, to acquire this. So it's an interesting concept, and you'd have to learn more about it. But it's an important concept, and I don't want to get too into it because we have like 16 minutes. But what happens? So we go up and hour and a half out walk. I'm like, what the hell is he doing up here? How did he find this thing? I mean, is this what he does in his spare time? Which is what he did.
Probably. Yes.
So I sit down there. He brings me to the plant, and I sit down with it. And like I had done before, I can get this energy, this impulse from it. And like I said, wherever, prior with electromagnetism, wherever there's an electrical impulse, there's a magnetic impulse perpendicular at a 90-degree angle, traveling around. And this magnetic field is separate from the electrical field, but they interact and one affects the other. And therefore, if they're not so coherent, but attracted to each other strongly, if not even attracted to each other, they wouldn't be able to separate, but they're separate at the same time. Much like what we're saying, actually, now that I think about it, what I do in energy medicine, and if we think about it, I'm sorry for interrupting another story here, but it's good for people to know.
Yeah.
When you are by an intimate partner and you're lying in bed with them, you at times, and I think everyone recognizes this, you're looking at them, you're feeling them, right? It's a different level of communication, right? You're feeling them, and then all of a sudden you know this subtle feeling in them, this subtle pulsing in them that you recognize as them, and then you go, well, maybe that's not there, right? Anyone
I don't know.
listening to this?
Do you think that really is a commonality of people that can actually do
Everyone feels it. If you start asking people, there won't be, I think, a single person that won't recognize it. Because when you connect with someone like that, and you be the judge of what I'm saying, everyone that's listening to this, just start asking everyone else. You probably, I'm assuming, recognize what I'm talking about. When you are intimate with someone, and I don't mean using and abusing someone, I mean intimate. Right. There's a definition, which I'm not going to go over, and hopefully you're wise enough to know it, right?
Yeah.
Everyone that's listening. Yeah. When you're there with them, and everything is quiet, and you're just feeling them, you're observing them, all of a sudden you'll feel an impulse. And I think you won't even realize what you're doing because there's resistance and denial. That's what I'm doing in energy medicine. I'm just feeling that, what I think is a magnetic electrical field, and I'm dropping myself into it. I'm just handling there. And then it's a practical thing because I can say, hey, I feel this in you here, I feel that in you there. And it's fun because people will say, yeah. And then I'll start seeing images and they'll say, yeah. I've had situations, thinking about circuitry and electromagnetism flowing between two people where all of a sudden light bulbs were cracking because of, I think, my metaphor of electricity and circuits. It was really screwed up. But anyways, I don't even know why I'm getting into that. But anyways, so, I'm sitting with this plant, and I'm reading all this information, and I'm gathering this, I'm gathering that, and he's just writing it down. And it's getting to the point where all the information is so similar to a homeopathic remedy I know, and I've memorized an entire text, or at least a certain portion of the entire text, that I can't go on anymore because it looks like that remedy. And at this point, I don't know if I'm feeling something from the plant or if I'm just coming up with symptoms inherent to that remedy. So I look up to him and I go, is this Simisafuga racemosa? And he goes, well, it's not Simisafuga racemosa. It's Simisafuga something or another. And he was like, well, racemosa is from Latin America and and this Simisafuga is from North America. And so I look at him, I go, but this is Simisafuga? And he goes, yes. And that blew my fucking brain. And excuse my language. And I sat there, and I actually got to the point where I was crawled up into a ball almost, going, how can this be? What's going on here? And as we were walking down from the mountain, I really wanted to step away from this. And what is interesting is what I used to step away from what happened. I had too much resistance. It was somehow too painful, or whatever that accounts for, or whatever that was. What I used was, you see, Simisafuga racemosa, even if this was Simisafuga something or another, its common name is black cohosh, which most of us probably, or a good portion of us, probably know black cohosh. And I had a dream last night that I was looking for a remedy called black something. At that point, I held on to the idea that the way that it didn't happen, this is what I told myself, which is just completely, and I'm going to swear, so for those that you don't like swears, cover your ears. It's fucking nuts. fucking nuts that I would use a precognitive dream to convince myself that my ability, unless this guy was lying to me somehow, but even then it wouldn't matter because I dreamed about it the night before.
Exactly.
But,
exactly.
But
so it wasn't even,
I'm still doing it, actually, if you can hear what I'm saying. You know, I just feel the resistance and the inherent denial, I think, and that I still can't accept it. But I used this idea that I dreamed about it to show myself how I knew about it. I said the reason I could get that information was because I already knew it, and I convinced myself of that. But I know that makes no sense. I know it makes no sense. But to this day, I question it because, you know, maybe he was lying to me. But whatever information I got from that plant, I dreamed of it the night before. Maybe it was interpretations of the plant, but there's still something funky in the aspect that I dreamed about that plant.
Yeah, and why would he even want to lie? Why would it benefit him to lie about it anyway?
No, he didn't come from that standpoint. And that kind of thing also is a certain synchronicity that we could poke holes in now that I'm thinking about it. And I could say, should I tell another story of resistance? We've got
8 minutes. Yeah.
Let me see if I can. Because this one was, what was that one this week I told you about it? What was that initial thing? I forget now. You know, where I heard the spiritual conversation after I asked for it on the radio. Do you remember the first thing that I was doubtful over?
Oh, no, I've been so many conversations since then, I don't remember.
Basically, I got what I would call a weak synchronicity. I measure and I quantify these experiences because if you don't, you can't decipher and feel secure with them. You'll start making up all sorts of shit to tell yourself that you're having them or not having them or whatever. So I quantify them so that it helps me assess if it's happening, or I could say, hey, you know, you saying that this hasn't happened doesn't make sense, you know. This must have happened. So I quantify them. I'd had a weak level synchronicity, which basically means I heard something or I thought something and then I heard it directly after. And it was of a relevant meaning and situation. It was more than some statement, but I can't remember what it was. So it was right after our show and I was, you know, a little perplexed. Actually, it was right after our conversation where I was saying, you know, we should meditate and generate the energy. If what I'm saying is true, then we can make something incredible about this. And, you know, if, you know, what happens to me happens to me. And if I can direct it, what would be possible? And if other people came online, what would be possible? And that's what I would ask anyone listening to this show to really seriously think about. Stay tuned. So there was that, and then I was really struggling. I didn't, it was such a low level synchronicity that if it was a synchronicity, it was easy for me to disacknowledge and forget. But at the same time, it felt like a synchronicity. You know, Carl Jung termed the word synchronicity, something that happened that is a breaking cause and effect. So I said to myself as I was driving to work, you just got to relax. You got to relax. You know, put your head, you know, on the headrest of your car, which is what I do to relax when I'm driving. Works pretty good. Put your head on the back of the headrest and just shut the you know what up and relax. And then I said to myself, well, I'll turn on this show. It was this really good talk radio that I have on my, you know, Sirius XM in my car. And just as I was starting to turn it on, or probably even a little before, I said to myself, if this is real, if this is a synchronicity, have someone come on talking about a spiritual show. And then there it was. It was this guy that I got to say was much like me, very intellectual, very spiritual, and could just pinpoint the conversation, say blah, blah, blah. And the other guy, I didn't hear what he had said, but basically the first thing he said is you just have to be who you are, you know, which is what I inherently have, because I don't want to, part of me wonders what I'm capable of And if that,
Yeah.
what does that mean that I might be special? Lord knows I don't run into people that have these kind of experiences. So
which goes
it
into
was
the
an
title,
interesting-
resistance.
What?
Which goes into the title. You're resisting that and being in denial of that.
Yeah,
who you
exactly.
are.
It goes in with the
Yeah.
title of this. And it also was like this person was saying, hey, you just have to be who you are. At that point, I was thinking, well, I don't know if that's spiritual. But then the other guy started talking about, what if I told you, because he was very, like, ridiculing him. And then when the guy explained it, he was like, because they were also friendly or something, or they were having an intellectual conversation. And the other guy said, well, what if I were to tell you these space aliens come down and want to tell you the meaning of the universe, or something to that effect. And then he made some other reference to some movie. And the other guy goes, first of all, your first comment was a reference to this movie, and blah, 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 explaining some of the details. And he said, and the second thing you said was from Scientology, And then I was like, ooh, that is all the spiritual nature. It's exactly the issue I'm having. You just have to be what you are. And, what am I supposed to think of this? So resistance. What do you always say to me, Linda? What you resist persists, or whatever.
Exactly. What you resist persists. I don't know who the author, the person who's that quote is, but yes, whatever you resist will persist. In life, doesn't matter.
Yeah, and what we talked about, we only have 4 minutes. I wanted you to say something, but when I resist that, one of the ways it manifests in this weird energy is electronics shut down with me. So,
I've had a lot of that.
And unfortunately, I can't tell you what that's like because we don't have the time. But it's strange. Anyway, I'll stop talking. Too much.
Well, I want to say a few things that, and then we can kind of close it as well. But some things that I wrote down that I thought were very fascinating for the listeners who will be listening to this show, if they're listening now, or the ones who will be watching this video afterwards, is that the key word is really feeling, because you were mentioning that you were feeling the plants, like feeling people.
The feeling is real. The sensation of who you are is not.
Yes. And also that people who are listening to really pay attention. I think this would make for a very much deeper, intimate relationship if you were very, very present. Because most of the time when we're intimate, I mean, how deep did we go in intimacy? It could be
but
where...
Linda, what's the contradiction there? What's the contradiction there? What's the contradiction there? What's the problem?
Not being present?
No, you're right. If we stay in feeling, we will experience much, but there is something inherent in us that might not want that. Because if we're all the same things, and this is sad, but it's not sad, it's actually quite pretty, there's probably a level of us that sharing too much intimacy could lead to the truth of what we are. I don't know that for sure, and I'm not saying that everything that I'm saying is right, but I think it explains some of the conflict, right? We all go, why are we conflicting so much? Why is this happening? And that's a good question to ask. But yes, I agree. When we feel
that's true, but that's true, but what I'm saying is that if we can be so, because I think most of the time, I can't speak for everybody, but I'm just saying, if you're listening to this, another way to look at this is that to really be able to feel another person and really tune in to that other person. That's what I'm saying. I think it can make a difference in your relationship, not only with that person, but with yourself, because now you've become where you're able to feel, where a lot of people have numbed out their feelings.
Yeah, well, the denial, they have to understand the denial aspect and the resistance aspect to open themselves up. That was one of the things I'm saying. But also remember, anyone that's listening, remember, if you've ever had that experience of that intimate connection with someone of the opposite sex, and you felt this vibration that you felt, it's inherently them, and you're saying to yourself, but what is it? Where is it coming from? I'm not touching them. That is the same thing that you would feel with everyone. It's just your focus into them. It's your love for them. It's your absolute love for them that you just sit there and stare at them and feel them without knowing you're feeling them. And that level of connection will make you feel that vibration. And if you look for that vibration in people, you will find it.
Oh, awesome. We're out of time. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was like such an enlightening and amazing, fascinating conversation. And I really think it really tapped on a lot of different levels into resistance and denial. So thank you so much for joining, being on the show today. We greatly appreciate it.
What?
We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. And thank you for all the listeners out there who joined us today and the ones who will be joining us on via YouTube. We thank you so much. Please remember to follow, subscribe, comment, and like us. And there will be a show this week, Thursday, August 13th. Well, actually, there's going to be one on Wednesday, the 12th, as well. But on August 13th, no, Thursday, August 13th will be Shiatsu to raise your consciousness with Allie Grove. So we'll see you then. But thank you again for being on the show. It was amazing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye.